The maintenance hangar at Kandahar Airfield buzzed with the familiar symphony of aviation warfare, hydraulic whines, metal grinding against metal, and the distant thunder of rotors beating against Afghan sky. Technical Sergeant Kalen Ghost Thorne crouched beneath the belly of an MH-60M Black Hawk, her calloused fingers working through a maze of communication wiring that had been giving the bird's crew fits for 3 weeks. Sweat traced lines through the dust on her face as she traced voltage paths with practiced precision, her tool belt heavy against her hips. She'd been at this particular nightmare for 6 hours straight, missing Chow, missing the mandatory briefing that half the FOB was probably sleeping through anyway. The comm system kept dropping satellite links at the worst possible moments, usually when teams were calling for extraction under fire. Yesterday, Chalk 4 had gone dark for 47 minutes because of this same intermittent failure. 47 minutes of silence, while Rangers painted targets and waited for air support that couldn't hear their calls. Ghost pulled another panel, revealing more of the digital guts that connected this machine to the war beyond the wire. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd been inside every airframe the Army flew, from Apache to Chinooks, fixing what others couldn't diagnose. 11 years of military service, 8 of those as aircrew, and now they had her grounded, fixing what she used to fly. The irony wasn't lost on her. Before the incident over Helmand Province, before the medical board and the forced career change, she'd been the pilot other pilots called when weather turned ugly and landing zones became death traps. Now, she spoke to aircraft through circuits and code instead of cyclic and collective. "Thorne, you still under there?" Staff Sergeant Martinez's voice echoed through the hangar. "Colonel wants to see you in his office, says it's urgent." Ghost didn't look up from the wiring harness she was rebuilding. "Tell the colonel his bird won't fly without functioning comms. I'll see him when this is done." He said, "Now, Ghost." Something in Martinez's tone made her pause. In 11 years, she'd learned to read voices like she once read instruments, subtle variations that meant the difference between routine and crisis. This wasn't routine. She slid out from under the aircraft, grabbing her cover and straightening her ACUs. Whatever Colonel Harrison wanted, it was about to change everything. She could feel it in the way Martinez avoided eye contact, in the sudden quiet that had fallen over their corner of the hangar. The walk to the command building felt longer than usual, each step carrying the weight of unspoken urgency. Colonel Harrison's office felt smaller than usual when Ghost knocked and entered, finding herself facing not just her commanding officer, but Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen from Special Operations Aviation Regiment, a man in civilian clothes she didn't recognize. And in the corner, almost as an afterthought, a Navy SEAL lieutenant whose tan uniform bore no visible identification beyond his trident pin. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with her multi-tool. "Technical Sergeant Thorne reporting as ordered, sir," she said, snapping to attention despite the questions crowding her mind. Harrison gestured toward an empty chair. "At ease, Ghost. Have a seat." His use of her call sign instead of rank told her this wasn't disciplinary. "What I'm about to discuss doesn't leave this room. Are we clear?" "Crystal, sir." The civilian leaned forward, his pale hands clasped on the briefing folder before him. "Sergeant Thorne, your service record indicates extensive flight experience in contested airspace. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Multiple decorations, including a Silver Star for actions over Helmand Province." Ghost's jaw tightened. The Silver Star came with a price, shattered vertebrae, 6 months of physical therapy, and a medical disqualification from flight status that had ended her career as a pilot. "Yes, sir. That's correct." "The incident that grounded you," Chen interjected, "involved flying a damaged CH-47 through a sandstorm to extract a surrounded Special Forces team. Engines failing, hydraulics shot to hell, navigation systems dark. You brought 12 soldiers home." "I was doing my job, ma'am." The SEAL lieutenant spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd seen too much war. Those 12 soldiers included my team, Sergeant, Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion. He paused, studying her face. You might not remember us. We were pretty shot up. Memory hit like shrapnel. The weight of that dying Chinook, cyclic controls fighting her every input, the GPS spinning uselessly as sand scoured the windscreen. She remembered voices on the radio, calm and professional, even as automatic weapons fire walked closer to their position. She remembered the landing, controlled crash, really, and the sprint to load wounded men while the birds shuddered and smoked around them. I remember, she said quietly. Then you'll understand why Lieutenant Morrison specifically requested you for this assignment, Harrison said, nodding toward the SEAL. The civilian opened his folder. We have a situation developing, classified beyond your current clearance level, but time is critical. We need someone who can troubleshoot complex systems under pressure, who understands aviation communications inside and out, and who can work with special operations units in high-stress environments. Ghost felt the familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with dread, the same feeling she'd had before every mission that mattered. What kind of systems? The kind that keep people alive, Morrison said. 3 days later, Ghost found herself in the belly of a C-130 transport, surrounded by equipment she'd never seen before and headed for a destination that didn't appear on any map she'd been shown. The briefing had been surreal, fragments of intelligence about compromised communication networks, mentions of adverse weather conditions that she suspected meant something other than rain, and repeated emphasis on the critical nature of maintaining contact with extraction assets. The gear strapped around her looked like standard comm equipment from a distance, but closer inspection revealed modifications that suggested capabilities far beyond normal military radio systems. Frequency analyzers, signal processors, encryption modules that looked more like something from a science fiction movie than a maintenance shop. They'd given her 3 days to familiarize herself with systems that normally took months to master. Morrison sat across from her, reviewing maps with 2 other SEALs whose names she'd been told she didn't need to know. They'd barely spoken during the flight, but she'd caught them watching her work, evaluating her competence with the subtle assessment that came naturally to special operations personnel. She was being tested without knowing the parameters. 30 minutes out, the loadmaster called over the engine noise. Ghost double-checked her gear for the 4th time, muscle memory from years of pre-flight inspections. Everything secured, everything functional, everything ready for whatever they were flying into. Through the small porthole, she could see mountains rising like jagged teeth against a sky that promised weather as unforgiving as the terrain below. Morrison leaned close enough to be heard over the engines. Once we're on the ground, you're our lifeline to the outside world. Nothing else matters if we can't call for extraction. She nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. In special operations, communication failures didn't just mean mission failure. They meant body bags and grieving families and memorial services where nobody could talk about how their loved ones had really died. The C-130 began its descent into uncertainty, carrying 4 people whose success or failure would ripple through classified channels and reshape classified missions in ways the world would never know about. The landing zone appeared through breaking clouds like a wound in the earth, a narrow valley carved between peaks that scraped the belly of the sky. Ghost watched through the crew chief's window as the pilot brought the transport in fast and steep, the kind of approach that spoke of hostile territory and limited time on the ground. The aircraft's engines stayed spooled up as they hit the dirt, ready for immediate departure. Go, go, go. Morrison's voice cut through the mechanical symphony of a combat offload. Ghost grabbed her pack and the 2 equipment cases that contained her responsibility for this mission, following the SEALs down the cargo ramp into air so thin it made her chest burn. The C-130 was already rolling before they'd cleared its wake, climbing hard toward safety while leaving them in a place that felt like the edge of the world. The silence that followed the aircraft's departure was profound and unsettling. No traffic, no machinery, no human sounds except their breathing and the crunch of boots on frozen ground. Just wind through rock formations and the distant call of something that might have been a bird or might have been something else entirely. "Welcome to nowhere," said the seal she'd been told to call Viking. His breath formed clouds in the thin air. Population classified, elevation classified, coordinates classified. Morrison checked his GPS and pointed toward a cluster of boulders that offered concealment from observation above. "We've got 8 hours to establish communications with Overwatch before they start assuming we're compromised. Let's move." The equipment was heavier than Ghost had expected, but she'd carried worse loads through worse terrain. The comm gear represented technology that pushed boundaries she was only beginning to understand. Satellite links that could punch through atmospheric interference. Encryption that cycled through algorithms faster than most computers could track. Signal processors that could find friendly transmissions in the electromagnetic noise of modern warfare. Setting up the primary antenna array took an hour of careful work, aligning dishes with satellites she couldn't see, while Morrison and his team established security positions around their temporary operating base. The equipment hummed to life, with sounds that spoke of power consumption far beyond normal military radios. "Overwatch, this is Ghost Actual," she transmitted on the prescribed frequency. "Comms check over." Silence stretched across the airwaves like a held breath. The first indication that something was wrong came not through her headset, but through Morrison's sudden tension as he monitored frequencies she couldn't access with her equipment. His hand signals to the other SEALs spoke a language of immediate concern, weapons up, scanning for threats that might or might not be there. "Try backup frequency," he said, his voice carrying the controlled urgency of someone who'd learned to function when plans unraveled. Ghost switched to secondary communications protocol, adjusting power output and antenna orientation. "Overwatch, Ghost Actual, radio check on backup frequency." Static filled her headset, not the clean static of empty airwaves, but the contaminated noise of active electronic warfare. Someone was jamming their frequencies, and doing it with sophisticated equipment that suggested adversaries more dangerous than local insurgents with jury-rigged transmitters. "We're being painted," Viking reported from his position behind cover. His tone carried the calm professionalism of someone stating facts about incoming weather. Multiple electronic signatures, moving closer. Morrison appeared at Ghost's shoulder. How long to establish satellite link through the interference? She was already working the problem, fingers flying over controls that reconfigured the communication array for signals intelligence mode. The equipment they'd given her was revealing capabilities she hadn't suspected, not just communication gear, but electronic warfare systems that could map and counter hostile jamming attempts. "Give me 10 minutes," she said, watching frequency analyzers paint a picture of electronic battle space that extended far beyond their immediate position. "But Lieutenant, we're not alone up here. Someone's running military-grade electronic warfare assets, and they know exactly where we are." The mountain wind picked up, carrying sounds that might have been engines or might have been imagination. In the distance, barely visible against the gray sky, something moved that was too regular to be natural and too far away to identify with certainty. Their 8-hour timeline had just become meaningless. Ghost's fingers worked across the frequency spectrum like a pianist finding harmony in chaos, each adjustment bringing their communication array closer to breakthrough against the sophisticated jamming that surrounded their position. The interference patterns were complex, layered, suggesting multiple transmission sources working in coordination. This wasn't random electronic noise. It was targeted, professional, and getting stronger. "Contact," the third SEAL, Callsign Reaper, reported from his Overwatch position. 2 vehicles, military configuration, approaching from the north, Range approximately 3 kilometers. Morrison moved to Ghost's position, his carbine held with the relaxed readiness of someone who'd learned to fight with weapons as natural extensions of his body. How much longer? Almost there, she replied, watching signal strength indicators climb toward usable levels. The jamming is adaptive, but I'm cycling faster than they can compensate. Need 30 more seconds. Through her headset, she caught fragments of transmission, voices speaking in languages she couldn't identify, using radio procedures that sounded more like military doctrine than terrorist organization. The electronic signature suggested equipment at least as sophisticated as what she was operating, possibly more advanced. 20 seconds, she called out. Reaper's voice carried new urgency. Vehicles stopped, personnel dismounting. I count at least 8 individuals, military bearing, professional equipment. Ghost's array finally punched through the interference, achieving satellite lock with a clarity that made her previous transmission attempts seem like whispers in a hurricane. Overwatch, Ghost Actual, emergency traffic. Ghost Actual, Overwatch reads you strength 5. Send traffic. We are in contact with unknown forces using military-grade electronic warfare capabilities. Request immediate extraction and close air support to grid. She rattled off coordinates while simultaneously monitoring the local tactical frequency where Morrison coordinated with his team. Ghost Actual, be advised extraction assets are currently engaged. Earliest available support in 45 minutes. Can you maintain position? She looked at Morrison, who was studying the approaching threat through his rifle scope. His expression answered her question before she could ask it. Overwatch, negative on holding position. We are moving to alternate location. Will maintain communications as able. Roger. Ghost Actual, maintain contact every 10 minutes. Good hunting. Morrison's hand signal brought his team into movement formation, a fluid reorganization that spoke of countless hours training for exactly this situation. Ghost, can you move that array? She was already breaking down the equipment, separating essential components from hardware they couldn't carry. Give me 90 seconds. The portable configuration sacrificed range and power for mobility, but it would maintain satellite contact as long as they stayed in relatively clear terrain. Ghost secured the essential modules in her pack while discarding antenna elements too large for tactical movement. Moving, Morrison called out. They displaced to higher ground with the coordinated precision of a unit that had worked together long enough to communicate through subtle signals and shared understanding of tactical priorities. Ghost found herself impressed by their professionalism. These weren't just soldiers. They were craftsmen who had elevated warfare to an art form. Their new position offered better observation of the valley while providing multiple escape routes if the situation deteriorated further. Ghost re-established communications within minutes, her abbreviated array still powerful enough to maintain satellite contact despite the ongoing jamming attempts. Overwatch, Ghost Actual, displaced to alternate position, still maintaining contact with hostile electronic warfare assets. Ghost Actual, interrogative hostile capability assessment. She studied her signal analyzers, watching the electronic battle develop across frequencies that civilian populations never knew existed. Overwatch, hostile jammers are military specification, coordinated, and adaptive. Recommend treating this as state-level opposition rather than irregular forces. The pause in transmission told her that information was ricocheting through command structures, where decisions carried political implications far beyond their immediate tactical situation. Ghost Actual understood. Continue mission as briefed. Morrison settled into position beside her, studying the valley through optics that revealed details invisible to unaugmented vision. State-level opposition, he repeated quietly. That changes things. Below them, The hostile forces had begun a methodical search pattern that demonstrated training and equipment beyond anything they'd expected to encounter in this supposedly abandoned region. Whatever mission had brought them to this mountain had just become significantly more complicated. The dance between Ghost's communication systems and the hostile jamming evolved into something resembling electronic combat, thrust and parry executed at the speed of light across frequencies that existed in spectrums beyond human perception. She found herself anticipating the enemy's adaptive responses, staying one step ahead through intuition developed during years of troubleshooting systems under stress. "They're learning," she reported to Morrison. "Each time I break through their jamming, they adapt faster. These aren't standard military systems." "How long before they counter everything you've got?" Ghost studied the frequency displays that painted real-time pictures of invisible warfare. "Maybe 20 minutes. After that, we're talking to ourselves." Morrison's expression tightened. 20 minutes meant extraction assets would still be engaged elsewhere, leaving them isolated in hostile territory with opponents who demonstrated capabilities beyond conventional military units. He keyed his radio to coordinate with his team's positions. "Viking, Reaper, be advised we may lose communication with higher headquarters in 20 minutes. Prepare for autonomous operations." Their acknowledgments came back calm and professional, voices that carried the confidence of soldiers who'd operated beyond support before and expected to do so again. These weren't men who panicked when situations developed beyond planning parameters. Ghost's headset crackled with incoming transmission. "Ghost Actual, Overwatch priority traffic." "Send it." "Be advised, National Technical Means have identified your area as active operation zone for unidentified military assets. Rules of engagement are now weapons-free for any hostile contact." The formal language couldn't disguise the reality. Somewhere in classified facilities, people with security clearances higher than she'd ever possessed were watching her position through satellites and sensors that existed in budgets she'd never seen. The mission had escalated beyond tactical engagement to strategic significance. "Roger, weapons-free rules of engagement." Morrison was already adapting their defensive posture, repositioning his team to better advantage against opponents who might include capabilities beyond conventional infantry. His movements carried the controlled urgency of someone who understood that survival often depended on staying ahead of enemy decision cycles. The hostile forces below had completed their search of the original landing zone and were expanding their pattern toward the team's current position. Their movement showed tactical competence that suggested professional military training rather than irregular forces operating with captured equipment. "Movement," Reaper reported. 8 personnel moving toward our position in tactical formation, professional bearing and equipment." Ghost fine-tuned her communication array, squeezing maximum performance from systems that were being pushed beyond their design specifications. Each successful transmission might be their last opportunity to coordinate with extraction assets that were fighting their own battles in airspace she couldn't monitor. "Overwatch, Ghost Actual, request immediate status on extraction timeline." "Ghost Actual, extraction assets still engaged. Earliest availability now 60 minutes. 60 minutes might as well have been 60 hours if the hostile electronic warfare capabilities continued to evolve at their current rate. Ghost made tactical decisions that would have been impossible 3 days earlier, when her understanding of these systems existed only in technical manuals and training scenarios. The mountain wind carried sounds that might have been equipment, or might have been the acoustic signatures of approaching aircraft operating beyond visual range. Something was coming. The first indication that their tactical situation had fundamentally changed came through Ghost's signal intelligence display. New electronic signatures appearing at the edge of detection range, moving fast and low through the mountain valleys. The frequency patterns suggested rotorcraft, multiple aircraft, flying in formation with sophisticated communication security that spoke of military professionalism beyond anything they'd encountered so far. Overwatch, Ghost Actual, detecting multiple rotorcraft signatures approaching from the east. Advised nature of friendly air assets in area. Ghost Actual, negative friendly air in your area. Treat all aircraft as hostile. Morrison appeared at her position with the fluid movement of someone who'd learned to relocate without disturbing tactical formations. How many birds? Ghost studied the electronic signatures, correlating signal strength with probable distance and aircraft type. At least 4, possibly 6 rotorcraft. Staying low, probably using terrain masking to avoid detection from higher altitude sensors. Time to contact. Based on signal strength increase, maybe 10 minutes. Morrison's tactical assessment was immediate and professional. We can't fight 6 helicopters with small arms. Options. Ghost was already working the problem. Her communication array configured for maximum power output despite the risk of revealing their exact position to hostile direction-finding equipment. Overwatch, Ghost Actual, require immediate close air support. Multiple hostile rotorcraft inbound to our position. Ghost Actual, all available assets committed to current operations. No close air support available for 90 minutes. 90 minutes. The number hung in the mountain air like a death sentence. Ghost keyed her radio again, desperation creeping into her voice despite years of training that emphasized calm professionalism under stress. Overwatch, Ghost Actual, request any available support. We are about to be significantly outnumbered. The pause stretched long enough that she began to suspect their satellite link had finally succumbed to the increasingly sophisticated jamming. When the response came, it carried undertones she'd never heard from military communications before. Ghost Actual, be advised, Archangel Flight has volunteered for immediate response to your position. Archangel is not under direct military command but has been cleared for engagement. Time to your position approximately 12 minutes. Morrison studied her expression. Archangel. Unknown call sign. Not under direct military command but cleared for engagement. Ghost shook her head. I've never heard of contracted air support with weapons authorization. First time for everything. The hostile aircraft signatures were strengthening rapidly, painting a picture of coordinated tactical aviation moving with purpose toward their position. Ghost's equipment revealed details that suggested sophisticated military helicopters rather than civilian aircraft adapted for hostile purposes. Viking report, Morrison called to his forward observer. Visual contact on hostile ground forces. They've stopped advancing and appear to be establishing defensive positions. Looks like they're waiting for air support. The tactical picture was developing beyond their ability to influence through conventional means. 4 special operations personnel with small arms against multiple military helicopters, supported by ground forces, represented mathematics that no amount of training could overcome through direct engagement. Ghost's radio crackled with transmission on a frequency she hadn't been monitoring. Ghost Actual, Archangel Flight, inbound to your position. Marking target area with red smoke would be appreciated. The voice was female, calm, carrying the professional tone of someone who delivered ordnance in contested airspace before. But something else came through the transmission, an undertone of barely controlled anger that spoke of personal motivation beyond military duty. Archangel, Ghost Actual, be advised hostile rotorcraft inbound to this position. Multiple signatures, military specification equipment. Ghost Actual, Archangel has them on scope. We'll handle the aerial threats first, then provide close support for ground forces. Keep your heads down and trust the process. Morrison was already marking their position with infrared strobes visible only to aircraft equipped with appropriate sensors. Ghost, who the hell is Archangel? Before she could answer, the sky above them erupted with the sound of jet engines operating at combat power, not the distant rumble of aircraft passing overhead, but the immediate, overwhelming noise of military aviation delivering violence with surgical precision. Through breaks in cloud cover, Ghost caught glimpses of aircraft she didn't recognize, moving at speeds that pushed the boundaries of controlled flight in mountainous terrain. The electronic warfare that had defined their morning was about to become kinetic. The first pass shattered the morning quiet with sounds that redefined Ghost's understanding of close air support. The aircraft appeared through cloud breaks like predators materializing from another dimension, sleek, angular shapes that moved with authority through airspace that had seemed impenetrable moments before. The ordnance they delivered fell with precision that spoke of weapons systems beyond anything in standard military inventory. Archangel, Ghost Actual, good effects on target. Hostile rotorcraft signatures have disappeared from my scope. Ghost Actual Archangel 2. Beginning attack run on hostile ground positions. Danger close ordnance, recommend you stay low. The second aircraft's approach was different from the first. Lower, slower weapon systems that painted targeting lasers across enemy positions with deadly precision. Ghost watched through her equipment as hostile electronic warfare signatures died one by one. Sophisticated jamming systems reduced to silence under ordnance that found them regardless of concealment or protection. Morrison studied the tactical development through his rifle scope, watching enemy positions that had seemed impregnable minutes earlier dissolve under air support that operated with capabilities beyond his experience. Ghost, these aren't standard military aircraft. She was monitoring frequencies that revealed details about the engagement invisible to ground observation. Archangel Flight is coordinating through encrypted channels I can't access, using weapons systems that don't match any aircraft in our inventory. Archangel, Ghost Actual, hostile ground forces appear to be withdrawing from contact. Ghost Actual, Archangel Lead, will maintain Overwatch while you coordinate extraction. Overwatch has been advised that your area is now secure. The voice carried satisfaction that went beyond professional accomplishment. Ghost found herself wondering about the identity of pilots who'd responded to their emergency with capabilities that existed outside normal military channels and personal motivation that suggested this engagement meant more than routine mission support. Overwatch, Ghost Actual, area secure courtesy of Archangel Flight. Request extraction at earliest opportunity. Ghost Actual, extraction en route. Archangel has provided escort for inbound assets. Time to your position 30 minutes. Morrison's expression carried the confusion of someone whose tactical understanding had been challenged by events beyond his experience. Professional soldiers learn to adapt to unexpected situations, but the morning's engagement had introduced variables that existed outside standard operational planning. Ghost, in 11 years of special operations, I've never seen air support respond that fast or deliver ordnance with that precision, and I've never heard of contracted pilots operating weapons systems that advanced. Before Ghost could respond, her radio crackled with direct transmission from Archangel Lead. Ghost Actual, Archangel, request you switch to discrete frequency for brief conversation. She looked at Morrison, who nodded approval. The frequency change brought her into direct communication with the pilot who transformed their tactical situation from desperate to secure within minutes. Archangel, Ghost Actual on discrete frequency. Ghost, I understand you're Technical Sergeant Kaylin Thorne, Coulson Ghost. Is that correct? The use of her name and service details that weren't included in normal tactical communications suggested access to information beyond what contracted pilots should possess. Archangel, Affirmative identification. How do you have my personal details? Ghost, this is Colonel Alexandra Voss, United States Air Force, currently assigned to activities that don't appear on organizational charts. 3 years ago, you extracted my son from a compromised position in Syria. Staff Sergeant Michael Voss, Ranger Battalion. Memory hit like revelation. A night extraction under fire, wounded soldiers loaded into a failing Chinook while hostile forces closed on their position. One of the casualties had been a young ranger whose injuries were severe enough to threaten permanent disability. She'd pushed that helicopter beyond its design limits to get him to medical facilities in time to save his leg. Colonel, I remember your son. How is he? He's a staff sergeant now, leading his own team. Still has his leg because of your flying. Voss's voice carried emotion that military communications rarely revealed. When Lieutenant Morrison requested you for this mission, and when your situation developed beyond conventional support capabilities, I volunteered to provide assistance. Ghost found herself struggling with implications that extended far beyond their immediate tactical situation. Ma'am, what exactly is Archangel Flight? Assets that exist for situations where conventional military responses prove inadequate. Think of us as problem solvers with advanced tools and minimal bureaucratic oversight. The extraction helicopter appeared through cloud cover right on schedule. Its approach coordinated with Archangel Overwatch in ways that suggested sophisticated joint operations, beyond anything Ghost had witnessed in her military career. As they loaded equipment and prepared for departure, Ghost realized their mountain engagement had introduced her to capabilities and personnel that existed in classification levels she'd never imagined. Whatever her future held, it wouldn't resemble the maintenance hangar where this had all started. The flight back to civilization gave Ghost time to process events that had challenged her understanding of military capabilities and organizational structures. Colonel Voss's aircraft maintained overwatch during their helicopter transit, a visible reminder that their morning engagement had connected her to operations beyond anything in her previous experience. Morrison spent the flight debriefing with his team, their conversation revealing professional soldiers working to understand tactical developments that had exceeded their planning parameters. They'd accomplished their primary mission, establishing communications in contested territory, but the broader implications remained classified beyond their access levels. Ghost, Morrison said during a brief lull in tactical discussion. Whatever that communication equipment really was, and whoever Archangel Flight really represents, today proved you belong in operational assignments. Your technical skills under pressure made the difference between mission success and potential catastrophe. She nodded acknowledgement while studying terrain that looked different from aircraft than it had from ground level. Mountains that had seemed insurmountable during their tactical engagement now appeared as manageable obstacles when viewed from adequate altitude with proper support. Perspective, she realized, often determined the difference between impossible and achievable. The landing at their destination revealed an airfield that didn't appear on standard aviation charts, runways and facilities that suggested permanent operations, but with security measures that spoke of activities requiring classification levels beyond her current clearance. Colonel Voss's aircraft landed simultaneously with their helicopter, coordination that had clearly been planned rather than coincidental. Ghost's first direct meeting with the pilot who'd provided their salvation came as she unloaded communication equipment from the helicopter. Colonel Voss approached with the confidence of someone who'd earned respect through demonstrated competence rather than inherited authority. Technical Sergeant Thorne, a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Ghost came to attention, unsure of protocol when meeting officers from organizations that didn't officially exist. Colonel Voss, honor to meet you, ma'am, and thank you for this morning. At ease. The thanks go both ways. Your son is alive because you risked everything to bring him home. Today was partial repayment of a debt that can never be fully settled. Morrison appeared beside them, his expression carrying questions that his training prevented him from asking directly. Colonel, if it's appropriate to ask, will Technical Sergeant Thorne be available for future operations of this nature? Voss studied Ghost with evaluation that went beyond casual assessment. That depends on whether Technical Sergeant Thorne is interested in assignments that push boundaries of conventional military operations. The work is challenging, often classified beyond standard levels, and occasionally involves situations where standard rules of engagement prove inadequate. Ghost thought about maintenance hangars and communication systems that failed when soldiers needed them most. She thought about her medical disqualification from flight status and years of fixing what others flew instead of flying herself. Most importantly, she thought about capabilities she demonstrated during their mountain engagement, technical skills that proved decisive when conventional approaches failed. Ma'am, I'm interested in assignments where my skills can make a meaningful difference. Excellent. Expect new orders within the week. Your security clearance is being upgraded, and your next assignment will involve equipment and operations that make this morning's engagement look routine. Voss paused, studying Ghost's expression. Any second thoughts about leaving conventional military assignments? Ghost looked at the aircraft around them, at equipment and personnel that operated beyond standard military organization, at opportunities to use her skills in ways that standard assignments would never permit. Her decision had been made the moment she realized how much difference her technical expertise could make when applied without conventional limitations. No second thoughts, Colonel. I'm ready for whatever comes next. The colonel smiled, the expression of someone who recognized competence and determination. Welcome to operations where impossible is merely the starting point. 2 weeks later, Ghost found herself in a classified facility that redefined her understanding of military technology and operational capability. The equipment around her represented advances beyond anything she'd encountered in conventional assignments. Communication systems that could penetrate electronic warfare environments she'd thought impregnable, aircraft that pushed boundaries of performance and stealth, weapons systems that delivered precision beyond her previous imagination. Her new clearance level granted access to operational details that explained their mountain engagement and many similar activities conducted by personnel whose names appeared nowhere in standard military records. Archangel Flight represented one element of capabilities developed for situations where conventional military responses proved insufficient for strategic requirements. Your first official assignment, Colonel Voss explained, handing her a briefing folder marked with classification levels she'd only recently gained access to. Communication systems for a joint operation that will test everything you learned during your transition training. Ghost opened the folder to find operational details that made their mountain engagement seem like routine training exercise. Multiple countries, strategic implications, electronic warfare environments that would challenge the most advanced systems in their inventory, and timeline that left no margin for equipment failure or communication breakdown. Colonel, this is significantly more complex than anything I've handled before. Which is why you're handling it now. Standard military technicians work within established parameters with proven equipment. We need someone who can adapt advanced systems to unprecedented requirements while maintaining operational effectiveness under conditions that don't exist in technical manuals. The mission briefing revealed scope and complexity that stretched her technical understanding while simultaneously exciting her with possibilities she'd never imagined. This wasn't maintenance work. This was engineering solutions to problems that existed at the intersection of technology and strategic necessity. Timeline for deployment, she asked. 72 hours. Your equipment is being prepared by specialists who understand requirements you'll discover during the mission itself. Trust your training, trust your instincts, and remember that flexibility often matters more than technical perfection. Ghost studied operational maps that showed terrain more challenging than their mountain engagement, opposition more sophisticated than anything they'd encountered, and success requirements that left no room for communication failure. Her new assignment would test every skill she'd developed while pushing her technical capabilities beyond anything she'd thought possible. "I'll be ready, Colonel." "I know you will." And Ghost, the call sign fits better now than it did when you were flying helicopters. You're about to become invisible in ways that matter to people who depend on staying connected when conventional systems fail. Looking around the facility at equipment and personnel that operated beyond standard military organization, Ghost realized her career had reached an inflection point that would define everything that followed. No more maintenance hangars, no more fixing systems for others to operate. Her technical expertise would now be applied to operations where her skills meant the difference between strategic success and catastrophic failure. The mountain engagement had been evaluation. Everything that came next would be execution at levels she was only beginning to understand. 3 months into her new assignment, Ghost had adapted to operations that existed beyond conventional military structure while maintaining technical standards that pushed advanced equipment beyond design specifications. Her communication systems had provided connectivity in electronic warfare environments that standard military equipment couldn't penetrate, supporting operations whose success depended on maintaining contact when conventional systems failed. The missions varied in scope and complexity, but each required technical innovation that combined advanced equipment with tactical understanding, developed through years of operational experience. She'd learned to troubleshoot systems while under fire, maintain satellite links through sophisticated jamming, and coordinate communication for operations that spanned multiple countries and classification levels. Ghost, you've exceeded performance expectations by margins that surprise even optimistic projections, Colonel Voss noted during her quarterly evaluation. Your technical adaptability combined with operational experience has proven invaluable for missions requiring communication support beyond standard military capabilities. The evaluation covered assignments that had taken her to locations that didn't appear on standard maps, working with personnel whose identities remained classified beyond her access level, supporting operations whose strategic importance wouldn't be understood for years. Her technical skills had evolved beyond maintenance and repair to encompass real-time system design and tactical electronics engineering. "Colonel, the equipment we're using represents capabilities I didn't know existed. How long has this level of technology been available?" "Longer than standard military organization acknowledges, but shorter than strategic requirements demand. Your work contributes to operational capabilities that bridge the gap between current technology and future requirements." Voss paused, studying evaluation reports that contained details Ghost hadn't seen. "Your next assignment will test those capabilities against opposition that represents peer-level technological sophistication." The briefing folder for her new mission contained operational parameters that made previous assignments seem like training exercises. Electronic warfare environments that would challenge their most advanced systems, opposition that included technology beyond standard military inventory, success requirements that demanded communication connectivity under conditions designed to prevent exactly that capability. "Timeline and location?" Ghost asked. "Location is classified until deployment. Timeline is immediate. Transport leaves in 6 hours, and you'll receive final briefing during transit." Voss's expression carried the gravity of someone assigning mission-critical responsibilities. "Ghost, this operation will determine whether our advanced communication capabilities can function against peer-level electronic warfare systems. Your technical expertise will."